The lights in my aunt's sprawling Texas home flickered like they were about to give up, just like the last shred of hope I'd carried into this reunion. Uncle Mark slammed his fist on the mahogany table so hard the crystal glasses jumped, and his voice cut through the forced laughter like a whip. "You're nothing but a disgrace to this family, Gabrielle. Parading that woman around like it's normal, after everything we've done for you." My heart slammed against my ribs as every head turned, eyes wide with the same mix of pity and disgust I'd seen since I was 22. Layla's fingers tightened around mine under the tablecloth, her palms slick with the same fear I felt, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. I pushed my chair back with a scrape that echoed like a gunshot. "Enough." The word came out steadier than I expected. I stood, pulling Layla up with me, our joined hands now visible to every cousin, aunt and grandparent packed into the dining room. My mother's face went pale. My father's jaw clenched so tight I heard the grind of teeth. I reached into my purse, fingers brushing the crisp adoption papers I'd kept hidden for 3 weeks, and held them high. "You want the truth? Here it is. Layla isn't just my friend. She's my wife. And this," I unfolded the document so the official seal caught the light, "is our daughter, Emily. We brought her home 2 weeks ago. She's ours." Gasps rippled through the room like a wave crashing on rocks. Aunt Clara dropped her fork. My brother Ryan stared like I'd slapped him. Uncle Mark's face turned purple. "You adopted a child? With her? You're dragging an innocent baby into your sickness." His voice cracked with rage, but beneath it I heard the same fear I'd carried for years. The fear that loving Layla meant losing everything else. I felt the old guilt claw at my throat, the voice that whispered I was selfish, that I should have married the nice boy from church like they wanted, that I was breaking my parents' hearts on purpose. But Layla squeezed my hand once, hard, and the guilt cracked just enough for me to breathe. That squeeze was everything. It reminded me of the night we first talked about adoption. Sitting on the fire escape of our tiny San Francisco apartment, city lights twinkling below while Emily's future photo from the agency lay between us. Layla had whispered, "We don't have to do this if it costs you your family," and I'd answered, "My family is you." Now, standing in the wreckage of that promise, I wondered if I'd lied. The room erupted, shouts overlapping, chairs scraping, my mother whispering, "How could you?" Like a prayer. I kept my chin up, but inside the storm raged. Was this courage or cruelty? The drive home that night was silent except for the hum of tires on the interstate. Layla stared out the window, her profile lit by passing headlights, and I could see the tears she refused to let fall. "They'll never forgive us," she said finally, voice small. I wanted to argue, but the knot in my stomach agreed. Back in our apartment, Emily slept in her crib, tiny fists curled, unaware that her new moms had just lit a match to my entire childhood. I sat on the edge of the bed, adoption papers still clutched in my hand, and the weight of every choice I'd made pressed down. Coming out at 23 had been the first crack. Marrying Layla in a quiet courthouse ceremony with only 2 friends as witnesses had widened it. But adopting Emily, choosing to build a family they would never bless, that felt like the final break. I thought about my father's face, the man who taught me to ride a bike and once called me his little fighter. Now that fighter had become his greatest disappointment. The guilt twisted deeper when I remembered the letter he'd sent after my wedding, the one I never showed Layla. "We'll always love you, but we can't watch you throw your life away." I'd thrown it out, but the words had stayed, echoing every time I looked at our wedding photo on the mantel. Layla slipped her arms around me from behind. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together." Her voice was steady, but I felt the tremor in her hands. I nodded, but inside I wondered how many more times I could ask her to pay the price for my truth. The next morning the calls started. My sister Lauren left a voicemail that cut deeper than Uncle Mark's rage. "You humiliated us in front of everyone, Gabby. Mom cried all night. Is this really worth it?" I deleted it before Layla could hear, but the words lodged in my chest like shards of glass. I stood at the kitchen counter watching Emily gurgle in her high chair. Her dark curls still new and strange against the life I'd known. She was the reason I'd finally spoken. She was also the reason the guilt might drown me. By afternoon Ryan showed up unannounced, eyes red from lack of sleep. "You could have warned me," he said, voice low so Emily wouldn't wake. "I had to lie to Dad for years about you too. Now you drop a bomb like this. The betrayal in his tone stung because I'd always thought he was on my side. He'd driven me to the airport the day I moved to California, hugged me tight and said, "Be happy, sis." Now that hug felt like a setup. I wanted to scream that I protected him too. Protected all of them from the truth until I couldn't anymore. Instead I said, "I'm done hiding, Ryan. Emily deserves parents who aren't ashamed." He left without another word, slamming the door so hard the pictures rattled. Layla found me on the floor afterward, knees pulled to my chest, and for the first time since the reunion I let myself cry. That night the three of us curled on the couch, Emily between us, tiny hand gripping my finger, and I realized the price was already higher than I'd imagined. My family's love had always come with conditions I could no longer meet. The question that kept me awake was whether I had the strength to pay it. The days after the reunion blurred into a haze of unanswered texts and slammed doors. My mother finally called on Wednesday, her voice thin and trembling like it had when Grandma died. "Gabrielle, please. Come home. Alone. We can talk about this." The word alone landed like a slap. I looked at Layla stirring pasta in our small kitchen, Emily balanced on her hip, and felt the old familiar tug-of-war rip through me. "Mom, Layla is my family now. Emily too." The line went quiet, then the dial tone. I hung up and stared at the phone until Layla gently took it from my hand. "She'll come around," she said, but her eyes said she didn't believe it either. I needed air. I drove to the park where we'd taken Emily for her first outing, the same park in the right half of that mental thumbnail I couldn't stop picturing. Sunlight on Layla's hair, our daughter's laughter echoing. Sitting on the bench, I replayed the moment I'd first met Layla 6 years ago, at a nonprofit fundraiser in San Francisco. She'd been the quiet volunteer coordinator with kind eyes and a laugh that made the room feel warmer. I'd been the nervous corporate lawyer fresh from Texas, still carrying the weight of my parents' disappointment after I'd come out to them over the phone the year before. We talked for hours that night about everything and nothing, and when she walked me to my car she'd said, "You don't have to explain yourself to anyone, Gabrielle. Not even me." That sentence had cracked open the door I'd nailed shut. 3 months later we were inseparable. My family knew by then. Ryan had let it slip during a holiday call, but they treated it like a phase. "Bring her to Christmas," Mom had said, voice bright with denial. Layla had come, smiling through the awkward questions about when she'd meet a nice man. That night in the guest room she'd whispered, "I can handle it if you can." I'd kissed her then, promising myself I'd never ask her to shrink for them again. The adoption decision came after 2 years of marriage. We tried every path. Foster care, private agencies, and when Emily's file landed on our kitchen table, her tiny face staring up from the photo, something shifted. Layla had cried. I had too. But the paperwork required family history, references, and I knew mine would be poison. We submitted anyway, and when the approval came through I felt both victorious and terrified. Now that terror had a face. My father's voicemail this morning, cold and final. "If you choose this life, don't expect us at any future holidays. We can't condone it." I drove home with the windows down, wind whipping away the tears. Layla met me at the door with Emily in her arms. "Your sister posted something on Facebook," she said quietly, handing me her phone. Lauren had shared a long vague post about protecting children from confusion, and tagged half the family. The comments were worse, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years calling us selfish, unnatural. The betrayal burned hotter than Uncle Mark's shout. Lauren had been my confidant growing up, the one who covered for me when I snuck out to see girls in high school. Now she was leading the charge. That evening I drafted a response, deleted it, drafted again. Layla watched me, patient as always. "You don't owe them an explanation," she reminded me. But I did. Not to them, to myself. I needed to understand why their approval still mattered so much when I had everything I'd fought for right here. Emily reached for me, her small hand patting my cheek, and the guilt eased just enough for me to breathe. The next confrontation came from the least expected place. My grandmother, 87, sharp as ever, called on Friday. "Gabrielle Marie, I raised your father to be better than this. But he's stubborn. Don't you give up on them." Her voice cracked. "And don't you give up on that little girl either." For the first time in weeks I felt seen, not judged. Grandma had never said a word about my sexuality, but she'd sent a quiet card when Layla and I married. That card was now taped inside my closet door. Yet even her support couldn't stop the nightmares. In them I stood at the reunion table again, but this time Emily was older, asking why her grandparents wouldn't visit. I woke gasping, Layla's hand already on my back. "We're doing the right thing," she whispered every time. I wanted to believe her. The logical part of me, the lawyer who won cases on facts, knew love wasn't a crime. But the daughter who grew up believing family was everything couldn't shake the fear that I was trading one family for another. By the end of the second week, the silence from Texas had grown deafening. No more calls, no texts, just the occasional Facebook like from distant relatives who didn't know what to say. I threw myself into work, taking on extra cases to distract from the ache. Layla did the same at the nonprofit, coming home exhausted but always with a smile for Emily. We were surviving. But surviving wasn't the same as thriving, and every night when I kissed Emily goodnight I wondered how long we could pretend the wound wasn't festering. The turning point arrived in the form of a certified letter from my father's lawyer. I opened it at the kitchen table while Layla fed Emily mashed banana, the spoon pausing midair when I read the words aloud. Disinheritance proceedings. Effective immediately. My share of the family trust. Money I'd never touched but always known was there, gone. The letter cited lifestyle choices inconsistent with family values, and listed the adoption as evidence of instability. I laughed at first, a hollow sound that scared even me. Then the tears came. Layla set the bowl down and pulled both Emily and me into her arms. "We don't need their money," she said, but her voice trembled. We both knew it wasn't about the money. It was the final door slamming shut. That night I drove to the beach alone, needing the roar of the ocean to drown out the voices in my head. The same beach where Layla had proposed, kneeling in the sand with a simple ring and the promise that we'd build our own family. I sat on the cold rocks and let the spray hit my face, replaying every sacrifice. I'd given up Christmases, birthdays, the casual "how's the family?" conversations at work. I'd given up the version of myself my parents had raised. And now they'd taken the last thread. The guilt that had been simmering boiled over into anger. Anger at them for making love a transaction. Anger at myself for still caring. When I got home, Layla was waiting with hot tea, and the adoption album open on the coffee table. Photos of Emily's first smile. First steps in our living room. "Look what we built," she said softly. I traced the pictures and felt the shift. The anger didn't disappear, but it reshaped into something fiercer. Determination. I called Ryan the next morning. "Tell Dad I'm not fighting the trust. But tell him Emily will never know her grandparents if this is how they treat her mothers." He was quiet for a long time. "You're really doing this," he finally said. "Yeah," I answered. "I am." The following weekend we took Emily to the zoo, trying to create new traditions. She pointed at the giraffes with chubby fingers, laughing when one bent down to look at her. Layla snapped photos, her smile genuine for the first time in weeks. I watched them and realized the price I paid had bought something priceless. A family that chose me every single day. But the peace was short-lived. Monday brought a text from Lauren. "Mom had a panic attack yesterday. The doctor says stress. You did this." The guilt roared back louder than before. I spent the afternoon pacing the apartment while Emily napped, torn between calling my mother and protecting the life I'd built. Layla found me in the nursery, staring at the crib. "You can't keep carrying their pain," she said. "It's killing you." She was right. But knowing it and doing something about it were worlds apart. The moral dilemma sharpened when the agency counselor called for our 6-month check-in. "Any family support issues we should know about?" she asked. I lied and said everything was fine. Hanging up, I felt the weight of another compromise. Was I protecting Emily or hiding the truth from the world the way my parents had tried to hide me? Layla didn't judge, but I saw the worry in her eyes. That night we talked until dawn, really talked, about what we were willing to lose and what we refused to surrender. By sunrise I'd made a decision. I would write one last letter to my parents. Not begging. Explaining. The letter took 3 drafts. I described meeting Layla, the fear of losing them, the joy of Emily's first word, "Mama," aimed at both of us. I ended with, "I love you, but I love them more. If you can't accept that, I'll stop hoping." I mailed it before I could change my mind. The waiting began. 3 weeks passed with no reply. I threw myself into work, winning a big case that should have felt like victory but tasted like ash. At home, Emily started walking, really walking, her tiny legs pumping toward Layla and me with equal delight. Each milestone should have been pure joy, but the empty mailbox haunted me. Then one Thursday the phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Gabrielle. My father's voice, rougher than I remembered. We got your letter. My knees buckled. I sank onto the couch as he continued. Your mother's been reading it every night. She cries. I don't know how to fix this. For the first time in months I heard uncertainty instead of judgment. We talked for 43 minutes. He asked about Emily, her favorite food, whether she slept through the night. I told him everything, voice cracking when I described her reaching for me after a nightmare. He didn't apologize, but he didn't hang up either. When Layla got home, I replayed the call on speaker. She listened with tears in her eyes. It's a start, she whispered. That night we celebrated with takeout and dancing in the living room, Emily giggling between us. The hope felt dangerous, like standing on thin ice, but I let myself feel it. The ice cracked sooner than expected. Ryan called the next day, furious. You wrote them a letter? Without telling me? Dad's been drinking again, Gabby. Mom won't leave the house. The betrayal I'd feared from the beginning had circled back. My own brother, the one I'd trusted with my secrets, had been feeding my parents updates the entire time, photos from Lauren's Facebook, details about the adoption I'd never shared with him. I thought I was helping, he said. Helping who? I snapped. The call ended with both of us shouting. Layla held me while I shook. He chose them, I whispered. The realization hurt worse than the disinheritance. Yet the following weekend brought an unexpected olive branch. My mother's car pulled up outside our building. She stood on the sidewalk, clutching a stuffed giraffe, eyes red. I met her downstairs alone. I just want to see her, she said. 5 minutes. I wanted to slam the door, to protect Emily from the same conditional love that had wounded me. But the little girl inside me, the one who still missed her mom, won. We went upstairs. Layla stayed in the bedroom, giving us space. Mom sat on the floor and let Emily crawl into her lap. For 10 minutes the room held only soft coos and the crinkle of wrapping paper as Emily tore into the toy. When Mom left, she hugged me, quick, awkward but real. I'm trying, she whispered. That night the three of us, for if you counted Emily, felt like a fragile new beginning. But I knew trying wasn't the same as accepting. The moral cost remained. Every step forward with my parents meant another layer of compromise for Layla, who had never asked for any of this drama. She never complained, but I saw the shadows under her eyes. The fragile peace shattered at Christmas. My parents invited us tentatively with conditions. Just the four of us, Mom said. No uncles, no questions. We drove to Texas with Emily buckled in the back. Car filled with the scent of pine air freshener and anxiety. The house looked the same, but the tension felt thicker. Dad hugged me stiffly. Mom fussed over Emily like she'd been waiting years. Dinner was polite, almost normal, until Lauren arrived uninvited. I wanted to see my niece, she said, eyes challenging. The room froze. What followed was the confrontation I'd replayed in nightmares. Lauren accused me of stealing a child to prove a point. Dad tried to mediate and failed. I stood, holding Layla's hand the same way I had at the reunion, and said the words I'd practiced for months. Emily is not a statement. She's our daughter. If you can't love her because of who we are, then we don't need to be here. Mom cried. Dad looked older than I'd ever seen him. Lauren stormed out. We left that night, driving through the dark with Emily asleep in the back. Layla didn't speak until we crossed the state line. I'm proud of you, she said. I cried then. Ugly, exhausted tears because pride didn't erase the hole in my chest. The new year brought clarity in the form of a family therapy session my mother had secretly arranged. The counselor listened while I poured out years of pain. Dad admitted the disinheritance had been his way of saving me. Mom admitted she'd been terrified of what the neighbors would say. Slowly, painfully, we started dismantling the walls. But progress was measured in inches. When the counselor asked if I could forgive the betrayal, I hesitated. Forgiveness felt like another price I wasn't sure I could pay. Back in California, life settled into a new rhythm. Emily started daycare. Layla got a promotion. I turned down a partnership at the firm to have more time with my family. The trade-offs were constant, but they were mine. One quiet evening, Layla and I sat on the balcony watching the city lights. The same view as the night we decided on adoption. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. She smiled, the same smile that had saved me years ago. "Never. But I worry about you." Her honesty cracked me open. I realized the real awakening wasn't standing up at the reunion. It was accepting that love and family could coexist without one destroying the other, but only if I stopped measuring my worth by their approval. Spring arrived with tentative visits. My parents flew out twice, staying in a hotel, taking Emily to the park, the same park from the thumbnail in my mind. Dad pushed the stroller awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence. Mom learned Emily's favorite songs. They still didn't call Layla daughter-in-law, but they stopped flinching when I did. The wounds weren't healed. They were simply bandaged. One afternoon at the park, watching Emily toddle between her grandmothers, one biological, one chosen, I felt the final shift. The internal war that had raged for months quieted. I had paid the price. Lost trust, lost money, lost the illusion of unconditional love. But I had gained something fiercer, a family forged in fire, not blood. Layla caught my eye across the grass and smiled, and I knew. The choices had been worth every tear. Months later, we hosted our first holiday in California. My parents came. Ryan sent a card but stayed away. Lauren remained silent. The table was smaller, the laughter quieter, but it was ours. Emily blew out her birthday candles, surrounded by people who chose her every day. When the last guest left, Layla and I stood in the doorway, Emily asleep on my shoulder. "We made it," she whispered. I kissed her forehead. We did. Looking back at the woman who once sat paralyzed at that Texas table, I barely recognize her. The girl who feared losing everything became the woman who discovered she already had it. The price was steep, the path brutal, but the awakening was real. Was I right to choose love and my daughter over my family's approval, or did I betray the people who raised me? True or false?